Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I want to thank Blooloop and Avixa for putting together this opportunity to talk about the trends in theme park attractions today. 2019 is a very exciting time in the theme park industry. You know, we're living in an age of transformation, accelerated change, and an overlap of technologies that are taking place. There have been some major new openings in the industry this year. Just here in Orlando has been Hagrid's Coaster, which just opened yesterday, the Star Wars Land, and these are reflective of the changes in the industry that are taking place with a larger sense of immersion, the opportunity for brand storytelling that's taking place, where an understanding of your brand, the manifestation of that, and the incorporation of a range of technologies to do this kind of storytelling, to incorporate the guests through that in a more interactive and experiential way, is evolving and being transportive and transformative for the guests overall. These emerging technologies, reflect some of the latest in virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, facial and voice recognition, mobile app and design for you to have a range of interactive components throughout the overall experience. And innovative show and practical effects are making a resurgence in the industry. So you're familiar, there have been a lot of media-based attractions in the last few years. And what you see now is a higher level of competency in incorporating the media and the physical effects and the physical components together to create a much more immersive experience that's blending those in a seamless fashion. And in that is a new range of customization, an opportunity for the guests to participate on a much more customized and individual level that's able to capture and retain data from those guests and have an opportunity for them to influence the story in multi-branching narratives and to have an opportunity to transform, develop, and enhance their overall experience overall. So what we'd like to do today is discuss where are we going and what's next. And we have some amazing guests here today to speak on behalf of that. And our first team to speak is from Falcon's Treehouse, and we have Brad Wallace and Saham Ali. Mike Wallace, my apologies. Brad Wallace, my door. Blew that, sorry.
That's all good. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Mike Wallace, the creative director with Falcon's Creative Group. Quick rundown of our company. We are anything and everything for theme park attractions, master planning, content, interactivity. And we're fortunate enough to have all of those functionalities in a single studio with about 60 people. So when we talk about what our presentation is on this morning about harmonious augmentation, we're able to control all of that in a very unique way inside of a single studio. So our master planner and our attraction designers are working day in, day out with our interactive designers, with our content producers to make sure that everything is seamless for our guests. So that's us in a nutshell. This is Saham Ali, our Director of Technology.
Mike breaks it down pretty well. My responsibility here at Falcons is bringing the technology very covertly into our attractions so it's not in your face. Working with the design team, of course, there's always the biggest initiative is the storytelling aspect, and we never want technology to be cumbersome. So what we put together is this little presentation to kind of talk a little bit about the history of these experiences that we've come to know that are really exciting for us, and kind of like the evolution. So real quick, some of the projects we've worked on recently, as of, I think the most recent thing would be the National Geographic up in New York. Yep. But immersive experiences, what are they? So they've been around for a while. They're not exactly new, but how we experience them is now ever evolving. There's that overlap of technologies, as Lewis mentions, practical and media-heavy effects. But the direct feeling of these immersive environments is to take you away into another world. It's to take you out of your normal reality and transport you into another world, another story, and doing it in such a fashion that it feels good. And the hardest thing to do in this is doing it with everyone, because doing this alone is not fun. To real quick, a little bit in the history of it, if anyone remembers this thing, is a really old device, been around for a while. In fact, my notes are not showing, so I'm going to wing this. This little device here, back in the 1950s, never actually caught on very quickly, but is a device that gave you the experience of stereoscopic, wind, some smells, and audio cues to make you feel like you're on a voyage, if you will. And this example is riding around on a dune buggy or sand buggy. But again, it was a one-person experience. You can't share that with anybody, but it was definitely pretty cool. However, never really caught on commercially. So fast forward a few years. So we always ask, well, you got your sound, you've got your touch, you've got your visual stereo. Well, these dimensions, as they like to call it, we've all seen these gimmicky ads, 5D, 7D, 9D, 12D. What does it really mean?
Diminishing returns after 3 and 4, I'm pretty sure.
So it comes down to a little bit about the physiology. It's like, how do we actually experience? And so as we know, there's 5 major senses that we have as we know it. However, if depends on who you ask, that might evolve to 12, maybe even more. But we can now, for the most part, say, you know what, yes, there's 5, but let's add on 2 more. And those 2 new ones, as we've recently started experiencing or knowing about, is the vestibular and proprioception. Vestibular being balance, and the body awareness of proprioception really came out when we started doing a lot of VR and AR. Being aware of our body in this virtual environment was a thing that we really had to learn when creating media, because if anyone's tried VR or AR, how quickly you can become sick if the media isn't produced in a fashion where it's complementary, because our inner ear is telling us you're not going anywhere. And you're doing all this locomotion in a virtual reality that tricks your body. So if you don't do it well, you can get sick very quickly.
Something as simple as a wind effect on your face or the awareness of the position of your hands takes that out of the equation pretty quickly. So.
Yeah. So the thing is, again, we don't like having experiences alone. We go to movie theaters, we're with friends. We go to concerts, we're with friends. We ride roller coasters, we're with friends. It's all about that community, camaraderie, experience. Shared experiences. So as we know, as we've learned, the shared experience economy is now on the rise. So some numbers here we can look at is the experience economy. Primarily the younger generation is really leading that. They rather do an experience as opposed to spend money on material things. 78% of millennials would rather choose to spend their money on the experiences. Electronic word of mouth, the Twitter, the social media, spreading these ideas and experiences through social media is way more impactful than putting it into the newspaper and hoping somebody picks it up. And then we're seeing the money that's being spent is just exponential since the early 90s. So, brings us to 86. Does everyone know who this is? Hopefully. So we have Michael Jackson, Francis Ford Coppola, and George Lucas. And together, they built this. Does anyone remember this at MGM Studios? Captain EO. One of the most expensive short films ever produced, about $1 million a minute. Overall, it was about $17 million. So still to this day, you factor in all inflation, it's still one of the most expensive films ever produced. And in this, we had stereo, show effects, what else here?
We had wind on guest, we had scent there, we had ambient lighting, show lighting outbound of the screens, everything synchronized to that point. And then the theater got retrofitted with some of the additional effects, the leg ticklers and the water mist and stuff when it became Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
So fast forward a few more years, Tim Disney took it upon himself to try a virtual reality theme park and built, what was it called here? Virtual World.
Yep.
And primarily had what we'll go ahead and call a multiplayer simulator that was BattleTech. So mech warrior type robots, and you get to play with other people. Again, it was an immersive experience, usually one person in a pod. And unfortunately, due to the IP, was really geared 92% towards males, so it didn't have a very broad reach in kind of getting everyone together. Fast forward a few more years, and we have this, which is the Back to the Future ride, which is effectively 24 ride vehicles, 2 separate domes, and it's a Omnidome with cars that raise up about 8 feet and are motion tracked to media. And at that time, if anyone even remembers, I still think it's one of the best rides to come out of Universal. It's pretty awesome.
Some of the biggest practical effect models that were ever made too for that show.
Yeah, and in the age of computer graphics wasn't fully there. It was a lot of like that dinosaur. That wasn't a CG dinosaur. That was practical.
He was in a cityscape that was about half the height of a full-grown person.
Yeah. So fast forward a few more years. In '94, they changed out Captain EO, and now we have Honey, I Shrunk the Audience taking on some of the upgrades, as Mike was talking about, the leg ticklers, some more water effects. Keep on moving here. This, my favorite, this actually got me really interested into the whole theme park attraction when I was younger, but T2 at Universal Studios was amazing because they were blending live action on stage as well as live action on film, along with CG 3D on film, and it interacted all with the audience. You had practical effects, you had robots on the side. It's quite amazing.
And if it had been built any time after '96, it would have been Terminator 9D, 12D, 7D, whatever it was. Like this is a concept, but I mean, this is effectively exactly what you felt when if show of hands, who ever got to go ride on this? Yeah. And it was one of the longest running ones, I think 20 years nearly. Yeah. 22 years this attraction was open, and it stood up.
March of last year.
Yeah, so really impressive, really long run. '98, Disney attempts the VR next-gen experiences. Everyone remember Disney Quest? Again, probably a little bit ahead of its time, but brought VR experiences, brought group experiences, the Rapid Ride, and the virtual reality, Aladdin's Carpet, like stuff that you couldn't normally do. They were bringing it down to the people that could go on the weekend instead of having to travel to a special off somewhere in some other country. However, they also opened 2. Most people don't know this. They actually opened one in Chicago. Unfortunately, only lasted about 2 years, but the one here in Orlando actually closed up until
It closed up last year?
Yeah, like semi-recently, so it was around for a long time. Enter 1999. This was a pivotal ride experience here. World's first synchronized media with ride vehicle in a dark ride attraction. We had projection mapped physical effects, tactile effects, and developed off the success of the T2 attraction. If anyone has ridden this ride, it's actually gone through 2, I guess, generations. About probably, I want to say
it was 2012 was when.
12?
Yep.
They redid the graphics and upped the fidelity of the 3D graphics to be more current with the time.
Changed it from film to digital projection too.
Yeah, so good upgrade. Here's an example of kind of the technology I'm talking about. There's your ride vehicle, and that screen is projection mapped, and the media content is timed perfectly with the movement of the ride vehicle, so you see that the perspective. Now, if you're not in the ride vehicle, it looks broken. So very interesting how you're able to make it look like you're looking into dark, long hallways, going up and down buildings. I honestly thought the first time I rode this, we're actually going up and down as they were raising physical, practical effects to make it look like you're being thrown up in the air by the goblin.
Right.
So quite amazing. 2009, a project that we at Falcons were able to pull off is in, what is this, Macau?
This is in Macau. This is Dragon's Treasure. It was the world's largest projected dome. I think still is, actually, until they finished that one in New York. But this had 500-person capacity, and the show ran for about 8 minutes, and it had physical effects, had water effects, had all kinds of things that dropped from the ceiling. And in 9 months, they got 1 million people through this experience, and it was a pre-show to a casino. Something that nobody expected would have the kind of response that it did, but proved that you could immerse a huge number of guests with projection in an area. And this effectively started us down our journey of massive group VR using projection on compound curves.
Yep. VR without a headset.
Yep.
Yeah, it was ahead of its time. Fast forward a few more years, something here right in Orlando, Turtle Trek was open again, another 3D dome, well, this one's 3D.
Yeah, the first 3D dome experience.
The first 3D dome experience right here in our backyard, 200-person capacity, and it's still running till this day. So 2012 got interesting. Everyone may remember the Oculus on Kickstarter. So this was exciting, especially for me, the tech nerd, because now they're showing we could try to take people, unfortunately in a singular sense, into virtual worlds using HMD technologies. But it was exciting for us as a company because this was effectively like another tool, another medium that we could harness. Keep on moving. So Oculus, kind of what it looked like. Quickly, we had to find out, we needed to define these, the dimensions as we were calling it, but VR, AR, MR, what exactly are these realities?
Virtual, augmented, and mixed, if anybody was missing those.
Main thing being the augmented reality is I still see the regular world, so I can see my friends, but I have a layer of data overlaid on top of it, so we can augment what we're really experiencing. 2016, we opened up the world's first motion-based it was a motion-based 3D dome in IMG World in Dubai, and this was really cool because, again, without an HMD, now we're able to provide two separate experiences, two linear stories in the same physical space at the same time, because we were able to choreograph the motion base along with the media content on the screen.
Saham playing with headsets.
Yeah.
After that photograph.
We were the beta testers on the HoloLens, trying to see what we can do with it, what we can't do with it, learning, again, to teach us the ins and outs of this technology. Again, not trying to shove the technology down people's faces, but seeing how it can complement the narrative storytelling experience.
Pushing the limits, because when my department goes over to Saham and says, hey, we have this really cool idea, he's always got a tech solution for it, and then I always want to say, I don't want to see the tech, I just want it to work.
Nat Geo, this was a really good example of using hybrid technologies. Everything from, there was a projection surface wall, 60 FPS, 60 FPS content of like a bait ball, so like a feeding frenzy, which wearing stereo glasses, it feels like you're there. At the same time, in another area, we had the ability for an interactive that leveraged VR technology for tracking that wasn't really even VR. We were just leveraging the tracking technology that was developed for the virtual reality technologies coming out and use that technology to create an interactive experience.
It became incredibly successful because we transitioned people from analog effects into virtual effects into projected effects all the way through this journey. So they walk in and the first scene is walking on an interactive floor. And then they go into a dark scene. Then they go into a transition down where we've just built physical kelp forests. And then they go into a mirror maze. And then they go into a big projected 210-degree surface. So keeping them guessing and using the tech to our advantage to help tell that story.
So I'm going to speed it up here a little bit, just go a little bit more on our project. So another example, it's an immersive experience, again, tied with a little bit of VR after the show because we didn't want to ruin the experience. So if you look in the center image here, there is a bunch of people, it's projection map also on the floor, so you were wrapped in media content. So it would actually go around you. So you were experiencing virtual reality without actually wearing an HMD. Another one we just opened recently was in 2018 at Battle for Hire up in Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. Yeah. World's first mass VR attraction. So it was a motion-based tied with Vive HMDs, which we had to solve hygiene issues by, you can actually better explain.
Yeah, by disconnecting the headset from the head mount. So what happens when you walk onto Battle for Hire, you've actually got the HMD is sitting at the seat waiting for you. In the pre-show, you're given effectively a hard hat harness, and you put that on just like you would any 3D glasses for any other show. When you sit down, it's a quick magnet connection. You pick up the HMD, pop it on your head, and you're good to go. They experienced, and Erik can speak to this because he was our client actually, about a 15-second increase in load time for 1,000 people an hour, 60 at a time. So, I mean, this is taking VR to the next level and actually making it functional in a theme park environment.
Yeah, throughput was up there. So now, again, with all these things that we've learned, we decided to develop our own solutions. Here's an example of, oops, let me back up there. It's a HMD that we've developed internally that is taking all the strengths of what we know and taking out the weaknesses of the technologies for FECs and other location-based entertainment and theme parks, and making a product that fits what their clientele expects. A rugged, I can drop it, I don't have to worry about it, it can get wet, it can be in its low overhead in operations to manage this thing. It's not I'm not handing somebody a $3,000 computer, it's oh, if it breaks, no biggie, it's a couple $100.
The goal here is to give them an experience that they can't have at home. You know, people can buy VR headsets, people can buy the latest game console, they can watch the latest films in great theaters at home. This is content that we choreograph laid onto a physical environment that they don't have access to readily.
So fast forward real quick, another evolution of that brought us to a product of ours called Aeon, which is, as Lewis was speaking, that culmination of having experiences that transcend they don't end at the theme park, they follow you home. They continue at home, and then you can come back to the theme park and augment your next experience based on what you did at home and what you may have gained. And a little bit real quick.
Aeon revolutionizes how guests experience, from brand destinations, live events, and individual attractions, to location-based entertainment venues and theme parks. The variety of integration is truly limitless. Aeon's ever-evolving ecosystem forges a new dimension of identity, empowerment, and personal investment, encouraging lasting engagement and repeat visitation. Aeon, infinite, immersive, integrated.
So, in a nutshell, you don't have to leave the theme park when you go home. You can continue in that world if you so feel so. And the cool part about it is it's going to change, where we're going to now have, as we develop real-time technologies, the ability to do real-time graphics that are so good, so we're no longer tied to a linear storyline. It's if everyone remembers Star Tours, about 6 different endings. You're supposed to have a lot of variations, but it never really ended up playing out that way because it was all baked content, branching storylines. Well, now with real-time engines, we're able to do as many possible storylines as we can. We can constantly update them. We can do holidays. We can do special events, whatever that case may be. So you're seeing an example of Hollywood using real-time graphics to do real-time green screen in Unreal Engine, putting somebody in space, which normally was a post effect that was very, very time-consuming and expensive.
It saves an awful lot of money on propping and set dressing too.
Really exciting technology would be like light capture stage, being able to capture from every possible angle with real life and then reprojecting that into virtual reality instead of doing it in CG. This is the result of what that can capture. All this was shot in one shot, but after the fact, I can change the camera angle to wherever I want. I have that volumetric data.
And we start to roll that into theme parks, and the sky's the limit to the kind of experiences we can provide.
Another example of that same technology, trying to run this along. This is a light field, if anyone's heard of this. Again, being able to shoot real life, real actors, but instead of being limited to just having a single plane, I can actually translate my head and get depth. That's always been the biggest limitation to this VR video, is I can move my head around all day, but it never looks like I'm actually moving. It's always static locked. Well, with this, you don't have that limitation anymore. You can actually move your head around with real video. However, real-time graphics, real-time technologies is where it's at. And we're really excited about it, especially with the new hardware coming out that's leading to realism on video game engine technology that is, it's just incredible. Let's see how I get... Yeah, I unfortunately can't forward it. But yeah, we're getting to photorealism in real time, which has not been a thing that's been possible because game engines have always been a hack to do things at real-time speeds. Offline rendering that visual effects and movies have been doing for years is very expensive, time-consuming, and also I'm locked. Once I render it, it never changes. In this, I can real-time interact with gesture input, with optical, et cetera. what we're going to see here at InfoComm is going to be really exciting, using off-the-shelf technologies. This is an old technology, but using in a very tactful manner is a Pepper's Ghost effect. It doesn't require a brand new $20,000 TV, just requires a piece of glass. Developed as far back as 1865, basic photonics. And then we've got new technologies, which is going to be really exciting for themed attractions by doing transparent OLED screens, holographic screens. This is a looking glass, basically a depth lenticular display, which allows you to look almost at any angle. And again, all that content there is rendered in real time. This is me with the leap motion knocking that in real time. So now imagine your guest being able to interact with the ride and changing the outcome of the ride. Holographic technologies, not too far away. I have to tell you, in person, it really looked like it was there. Same thing, fire and water. Again, real-time technologies and real-time tracking brings us possibilities of doing things like this. Taking somebody and putting them in another world in real time on projection map surfaces. Mm-hmm. If anyone saw the Grammys a few years ago, David Bowie, they did a tribute Lady Gaga. They actually projection mapped her face in real time with motion capture, and we're able to do real-time graphics, like having a spider crawl out of her mouth and all these effects. That brings a whole new level of things we could do with on stage. So what does that lead to? Just to wrap it up here, is the immersive experience. What is it going to be in the future? Well, I would love that. I would love to be there with my friends. I would love to be able to interact. I would love to be able to extend these experiences beyond the physical space. And as much as it's cool as it is, as much as I want to do the holodeck, I don't want to be alone. Playing on her phone. Thank you.
I want to give a big round of applause for Mike Wallace, Creative Director at Falcon's Treehouse, and Saham Ali, Technology Director at Falcon's Treehouse. And to mention what they're talking about, think about it, is this is not only changing location-based entertainment, this is changing the entire pipeline to film and television production. What we're talking about is complete virtual production of all assets that are out there. It's revolutionary what's going on from that standpoint. And I would also add technology they didn't mention today that's going to be incorporated in things that they're doing are haptic feedback. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of material happening with Soundwave and those kinds of content that's going to add yet another level to those feedbacks that the guests are having and experiencing. So thank you guys very much. That was really exciting. Sure. Great stuff. So next up, we have Traci Klainer, who's the Creative Director for Seaworld Parks and Entertainment, and Erik Baeumlisberger, who's the Emerging Technology Project Manager for Seaworld, dealing with virtual reality and production. Thank you very much.
Hi. So when I was asked to speak on this technology panel, I thought, what am I going to do with my background of creative and storytelling? So I went over to Erik, and I said, hey, let's chat. And so I said, how are we as experienced designers engaging our visitors with our toolbox and not using technology just for technology's sake? And we started having this conversation about re-adding in or bringing back the human aspect and about personalization and how personalization is actually the thing that makes a guest comfortable and makes a guest want to return to our experience. And actually, personalization gives them the comfort to join in. So we knew this was going to be a varied audience today, so we've decided that we're going to define what personalization is to us so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, for sure. I think that this presentation, at least it aims to dovetail into what Saham and Mike did in terms of we have the technology, now how do we make it more about the guest experience?
Yep. All right. Oops, did I skip one? Yeah. So to us, personalization is how we make guests part of the story instead of being passive. It's a handshake that happens that makes the guest comfortable joining in. And it creates multiple journeys for multiple guests. And it brings our guests back, and that's what we want. Meeting a sloth at Discovery Cove, competing for a high score on a Toy Story or another ride like that, connecting to a new, exciting aspect at Galaxy Edge. It's those things that we keep wanting to come back to.
Yeah, for sure. So we wanted to sort of baseline the basics of personalization because of the varied audience in the room today. So using websites, apps, and smart devices to customize your experience. So there's pre-arrival, during visit, and post-visit opportunities within apps. Hotel and dining reservations, VIP, ticket upsells, these types of things. And breaking down that categorization even further, there's free and then there's pay to play. So an example of a free included with ticket price is, we all expect to do this nowadays, reserving hotel rooms, reserving your dining, booking limited ride reservations. But there's also this other layer that we're going to introduce next, of park or land-wide technology-enhanced missions. So this sort of thing invariably turns up everywhere. Every owner has dealt with it. Some owners have dealt with it successfully, some owners not so successfully, but this comes up a lot. And the idea is, let's build an app, and let's send our guests on a scavenger hunt throughout the area to move guests from one area to another, to build a character, to level that character, add abilities to the character. This comes up all the time. So how do you make this different? Well, in the example I provided here, I think there's something really interesting that they actually added an AR component to the app. So they're selling AR-enabled t-shirts, AR-enabled merchandise. But also as a designer, the designer now has the ability to build an AR-enabled monument sign. So that's super fun. Now you can have this gatekeeper sign, and a griffin could come in and complete that sign without actually having to build the griffin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of free. Now we go over to pay to play. So I bought a theme park ticket. The traditional model is everything's included, but what we're seeing is a little bit of a paradigm shift into, I want to connect deeper with the IP. What options do you have for me? So an example at Seaworld San Diego, Orca 360, we have an option for guests to connect deeper with the animals. So this is 3D 360 live action film. It's not CGI. So we went underwater with the animals. Full stereoscopic. We invented a saltwater-proof camera rig. We invented a saltwater-proof jib. And we did all of this so that guests that wanted to be closer to the animal could. Now, personalization also comes in unexpected forms. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Yeah, I love this.
It's not just technology. You can personalize by designing for kid empowerment. So that means putting displays at kid level, down here, 36 inches, real low. And then focus on kid-driven decision-making. So we have some examples of Sesame Street at SeaWorld Orlando. Kids sizing, when Traci was talking about the handshake, when a kid sees something at their level, they know it's for me. So that's a permission thing. Like, they now have permission to do all these things. Max reach height for children seated in wheelchairs, again, 36 inches. So we're talking about things that are very, very low, but kids see it and they say, oh, it's at my level, it's for me. So we have, this is actually a display. This is an analog, completely analog interactive. And now we have washing machines with screens behind them that kids can pop bubbles.
And what I like about this too is that there are two different heights. So depending on the age of the kid, depending on wheelchair, depending on how you want to interact with it, there are different options.
Right. So again, Saham and Mike were talking about sort of pushing that technology back, putting it in an analog wrapper, but making it still fun. Kids are native touchscreen users. You probably have kids. You probably know that. If you give them something like a door knocker, they don't know what it is. They've never seen one before. They don't know what to do with it. And if you give them any display that isn't a native touchscreen, they're going to touch it anyway.
So my background is actually theater, and then I had a company for 17 years that did museums and theme parks and live entertainment. So we talked a lot about how actually all of our industries don't talk to each other enough, and actually we can all really learn from adjacent industries. So Erik and I went through and had this conversation about what experiences we had or what cool things we'd heard about. So we wanted to give you some ideas from what's happening now and what's going forward about personalization. So we're just going to go through a couple of items of places we've been and what we've had fun at.
Yeah, correct. We're taking cues from these adjacent industries. There's many adjacent industries in entertainment, But museums, immersive theater, online gaming, they're all doing really cool stuff that theme parks are lagging behind in integrating. So this is what's coming next. College Football Hall of Fame. Has anybody been there in Atlanta? Okay. So they have, again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to be successful with technology and personalization. So they give guests an RFID card when they arrive. The RFID card ties to their home team. And when they walk into areas with displays, all of that's recognized for the guests. So literally, you can walk into a room, and every display in that room changes to your alma mater. Now, this is transparent technology. It's fantastic. One of the best uses I've seen. They also have this wall of football helmets that right when you arrive, you see lights behind the football helmets, and that's a visual indicator of who's in the building with you. So there's actually a social component in there, too, where you can see, well, somebody from my alma mater is here too. So you want to go and find that person. Like, how are we here at the same time together? If it's a small school like Plymouth State College in New Hampshire, they have a helmet there. And if it's lit up, somebody else is there.
So the Cooper Hewitt is a design museum, and when you first walk into the museum, with your ticket you get the pen, which I'll show you in a moment. And what that allows you to do is actually gain more information about their collection, dive deeper. You become a designer. You can use your pen, design items, save it, and then after you leave from your visit, you can actually go to their website and learn more information. So you're going to see here, so this is the pen.
So we know wands, that's a thing, right? You know, bubble wands. We have Harry Potter wands. We have made with magic components at our friends down the street. This is something that is not very kid-friendly. It ages up, but kids can also use it.
Yeah, I was going to say, because when you're going to see, not to contradict you, but what you're going to see is that actually you can use it as a designer on a touch table. And actually you were saying to me how cool it was, because what you're going to see at the end of this video is a guy actually creating his own design. It's a design museum. He's creating wallpaper that then goes up onto a screen in the gallery that other people in the gallery can see. So you're actually having your own personalization. You're personalizing your visit. You're saving this design. But then you're in the community of the room of people in the gallery. So you're now part of that community, something that the two gentlemen from Falcons talked about. So you're still having that interaction with other people, but it's still personalized.
And who knew that people collected wallpaper?
Yeah,
well,
right.
They do.
Right.
And this is your opportunity to design your own
Yes,
wallpaper.
exactly.
You know. The Willows is another one of my favorite things to talk about. So this is an immersive gothic horror play in LA. When you arrive, you're given an email with a destination. It's a corner. You meet there in LA. 2 black SUVs pick you up and they blindfold you. And they take you to this house where this play comes to life. So you have the ability to, like Sleep No More, if you've ever done that, you can follow these performers around to have your own version, or get to know their version of the story, or you can actually sit down with the performers and eat a meal with them. They serve you soup, a little bit of meat, a little bit of bread, and you can talk with them and they can interact with you, and it's improvised. The actors are improvising around a story arc. But if you talk about this in a queue for an attraction, that changes the game.
Because now you're connecting with that story before you're ever on the ride.
And it's always different.
And it's always different because of that human aspect.
Correct.
Meow Wolf, I'm sure you all have heard about Meow Wolf. They're big now, and they just were on the Today Show. I've been there. So it's part theater, part exhibit, part live event, part immersive experience, part themed entertainment. But they use technology in a really simple way. It's sound, lighting, and some interactives. So you'll see some of that throughout this video. You know, you just saw opening up a refrigerator and going through it. But they also have that human element. They bring in performers, they bring in actors that interact with the guests. So now the guest in this experience is being introduced with technology and with a human aspect to this new weird world, and they're creating their own journey. And they can go anywhere they want, and they'll keep interacting in different ways.
Yeah, this is a very early version of Meow Wolf that you're looking at. They're opening a new version in Las Vegas in a bespoke theater for the first time. So we all can't wait to see what happens there and how they're layering things like that transparent OLED that Saham showed you. Like, how do we layer that in with a real actor, and what kind of effects can we create?
And the also interesting thing about them is that they started off in this world, immersive theater, but they just opened a ride in Denver, and they're opening up a theme park ride, a dark ride, and now they're going to open up another house also in Denver, and that's their goal, is to push the boundaries. So I think this is somebody we need to learn from.
Sure. So this is kind of where it all comes together. So I started this presentation, or this part of the presentation, by seeing that we need to take, as theme park designers, we need to take cues from adjacent industry. But one of the things we're not doing enough work with is the gaming market, okay? So online gaming, everybody knows stats. Stats are crazy. But if you look at this one stat from Fortnite, crazy, right? $61 billion in microtransactions in 2018. Articles written about why apps should monetize like mobile games, and this one from LA Times, video games move out of the living room and into theme parks. This is what's coming, okay? Now, how does that happen? This LA Times columnist says, in the theme park industry, attractions that encourage head-to-head competition are growing in popularity because not only do they entice visitors, particularly video game-loving millennials, to visit a park repeatedly to improve their score to beat new challengers, but they also, in my opinion, that's that reason to come and bring your friend and develop a love of something that you do. So that's that shared experience, and that's also that shared connection with an IP. So getting people into that IP. CEO of Cedar Fair says, for decades, rides and attractions have been based on storylines and movies. We saw T2 in the presentation before. It's a little surprising that video games haven't worked their way into this arena sooner. So again, this is coming. This is our last slide, but I think this is the holy grail. This is the paradigm shift that's going to happen. Somebody's going to do it. And when you see it happen, it's going to change everything. So imagine that you either are given a ticket that's RFID enabled, or you buy a ticket in a gift shop that's RFID enabled. You tap the card when you enter the queue. Now you have an array of things to do in the queue, screen-based games. Let's just start there. So while you're playing the game, you're actually adding abilities to your card. You play the interactives to earn more rewards, to earn more abilities, and then you tap the card when you're done. You're about to ride the vehicle to store those rewards. Now, when you get on the ride vehicle, you're tapping the card at your seat. You've now enabled that seat, whether it's a Toy Story plunger or if it's an MIB laser shooter, you've enabled those abilities at that seat. Now you're riding with enhanced abilities. So say if it's a 4-seat vehicle, you're going to have some guests that have enhanced abilities. Let's say they're a level 60, and you're going to have some guests that are just a level 3. That level 3 is going to see the abilities of a level 60 and say, I got to ride this again to build those abilities. Or go to the gift shop and buy it. So with a $5 transaction, you can now be a level 60, or a $20 transaction, whatever the price point may be. But it solves the problem of when you ride a dark ride, it can be the same over and over again. What is it changing? What's making it different, new, and unique? Well, now the players are what's making it different, new, and unique. It's not the designers. The designers have built that ability into the attraction. Now it's the players that are changing everything.
Yeah, it's very much Ready Player One. So that's us.
That's us. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Traci Klainer, Creative Director for Seaworld, and Erik Baeumlisberger, say that again. Erik Baeumlisberger, Emerging Technology Project Manager at Seaworld Entertainment. Next up, we've got Bradford Benn, CTS Manager and Audiovisual Systems for Universal Creative.
Thank you. So I'm the audio guy in the room. Since I know Avixa, I'm actually a CTS holder. I give Dave Labuscus the joke of he has modeled all of the Avixa renaming after me because everything these guys have talked about was all me. And I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I was sitting there going, they're talking about Terminator 2, one of my first attractions I ever worked on in this industry. It was 3D projection, and 92 loudspeakers overhead with 512 delay channels to get that immersion. They were talking about Spider-Man with 3D audio and being able to track onboard and offboard, another one of my projects. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, as they've talked about, this is all based around cutting-edge audio and video. So I can talk about all of this stuff, but I think you've already figured out I'm old. I've been doing this for 25 plus years. I've also worked as a manufacturer. I've worked as an integrator. And what I want to do is wrap up everything that we've talked about to kind of bring it back to what we're doing here at Infocom. So, you know, there's Avixa's tagline, the Audio, Visual, and Integrated Experience Association. That's what we're trying to do. And, you know, there's talks about what is an experience. Is it a conference room that doesn't work effectively? That's an experience. Is it going and standing in a 10-hour line for a brand new roller coaster that just opened today? That's definitely an experience. I'm here, not there. But it's the unique experience, the communal experience, as we talked about, that everyone has been talking about for the past half an hour. But what I want to talk about and kind of highlight and where we come in as AV professionals is what we can bring to help. You know, as you can see there, cinema. Everyone thought it was going away about 10, 15 years ago. We can talk about the how much money has been spent in home theaters through the CD Association, all of that stuff. They can talk about when they started putting 3D in the home. But then you look at something like Jurassic World, $625 million in box office revenue. Just happens to be one of my employer's movies. There are other ones that might have more zeros after it. But it proves that the cinema is coming back into a renaissance for the exact same reason, enhanced experience. If you watch a movie at home, it's a little boring, especially if it's a comedy. You feel a little odd laughing in your own living room by yourself, and your wife asks you weird questions like, are you okay? So that's why I talk about, you know, playing video games by yourself is not as fun as playing with friends. You can look at this as they were talking about Fortnite. Fortnite, you play against other people. You look at Grand Theft Auto 4 that you can play online, Call of Duty. All of these things are establishing a community, whether online or in person. And the same thing, like I said, about a comedy movie. But the other thing, and this is where it's going to sound like a sappy comment, but it's actually true. The theme parks and amusement parks are where we can bring people together for those memories. I get to talk to a lot of people who, you know, have young kids who talk about, I remember bringing my son or my daughter to go play at Seuss Landing every Christmas for 5 years. It's a pretty cool thing to do. But that's what we're also trying to do is, you know, everyone travels down to see that. So let's talk about AV. If we do our AV job well, no one knows we're there. You know, we want to set the tone for the themed area. We want the background music. The big thing is we don't want people to remember that there's an outside world. We're very similar to a casino market. We try to separate you from your money and help you have time with a smile. I'm sure I'll get in a little trouble for that one. But that's kind of the idea. We don't like having clocks. We want you to be in that magical world, be fully immersed, and do it at a scale that can't be done at home. As they were talking about Spider-Man, that's a 30-foot tall screen in some of those scenes. Most of us can't do that scale at home. If you can, let me know. I'll bring the popcorn. We'll have fun. When you talk about something like Seuss Landing, going into the books that you read as a child or that you read to your child is kind of cool. But it's important to do and to use AV to assist it and support it. Yes, there are things like Terminator 2 where the AV was very much in your face. But if you've ever seen the T2 movie, it was something that was very much in your face. You know, we want to support and tell the stories. And as I say, we still need team members or cast members or employees to help, as you saw when we were looking at the Meow Wolf. But the thing I also like to point out is we also have to do storytelling. How many of us have seen the Waterworld movie? Okay, so I'd go less than half. That is still one of Universal's top running shows almost 30 years later. So we have to explain to people what's going on. If you look at Terminator 2 that ran for 22 years, or you look at Men in Black that's still running already very close to 22 years, there are people who come to attend that don't know the story. And I'll use myself as an example. I don't read Harry Potter. It's one of our big things. I stand in the queue. It tells me the story I now understand. If you look at something such as our new coaster we opened up today, Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure and Wondrous Creatures, I hope I got it right, they explain everything in the queue, so it's a story coaster, and that's where AV comes into play. Not only is it loading instructions that we all talk about, it's about the whole idea of exposition and making it consistent. So, what's the next thing? These are my wrap-ups, and this is where we come in. The challenges we have are mobile devices. And this is, sorry, Eric, I told you I was going to disagree with you. There are times you don't want people looking at their phones because they're not experiencing it. You need to entertain them. You need to make it something different, because if they're looking at their phones, there's not a reason for them to be there. I'm not trying to be mean, it's just something to consider. And if you go and you're in Harry Potter, or you're in The Simpsons, or you're in Jurassic World, the phone's going to take you out of it. So we as the AV team try to make sure you're always entertained. And this is where us as integrators and designers get to do cool things that you never thought of, like the whole idea of putting a portrait up that moves, doing video effects. We also have the challenge of older technologies. And this is my polite way of saying some amusement parks and theme parks haven't always updated their technology. It's kind of like, I don't know about you, I always cringe when the way they show whether or not a microphone's working in a movie, they tap it and you hear the feedback. Well, some amusement parks and theme parks have that reputation as well. And then the other thing, and this is something that sets it apart from conference rooms and from boardrooms and from some of the, as I call it, the mainstream projects. You might have 4 conference rooms that all are identical. Great, but then you're going to have 2 that are a little different. So you have to customize those. I can tell you that we at Universal, I'm sure Seaworld has it, I know Disney has it, we have a few attractions that are built multiple places. But the vast majority are still a one-off special project that we have to start from the bottom up. And this is something that as AV people, we get to help to steer the story and invent new technologies. So it's something to think about. And when we're talking about experiences, while yes, we've been talking about theme parks. Theme parks are a huge growth industry for the AV industry. The same experience happens in restaurants, in museums, in retail spaces. If you look at some of the malls, they're doing the same thing with the amount of entertainment. But we're talking about this to kind of give you the overall idea of it is possible to push the edge and do really cool AV stuff and really huge projection all in the same market and help create that experience that's a unique thing. I've been told I have to say this before I hand it off and ask and give the opportunity to play with the catch box. When you came in, you should have gotten a form to fill out about your session. Please fill it in. Give us all high marks. But this is actually important, so that way people know what to do. I know on behalf of Blooloop, which if you guys haven't followed, I highly recommend. This is an important thing so that we as volunteers and instructors know if we're providing you the right information. So with that, I'll turn it over for Q&A.
Thank you again to Bradford Benn, CTS Manager and Audiovisual for Universal Creative. Well, first I want to say thank you to all of our great presenters. You know, they've done a fabulous job talking about the industry and all the technological advances that are out there. And now we'd like to take a moment to bring everybody up on stage to have an opportunity to do some questions from the audience.
Someone has to ask a question because Charlie just really wants to throw the catch box at someone.
Oh, that was a real thing.
Yeah.
It's cool. Is this thing on? Okay, I'm not sure if it's on, but I'll talk. Here we go. How do you balance what you're trying to do as far as new immersive technology, individual experience with the nostalgia aspect of a theme park? What brought you there when you were a kid? What places you want to experience with the next generation? Those kind of things.
Okay. Who wants to take it? If
I'll field one. Why not? So, the early part of my career, the first 10 years, was actually spent with Universal, and our drive there, and as it continues with Bradford, as it continues now that I'm with Falcons, has always been about making the technology so transparent that the enjoyment you feel and the story you experience is the same story that you experienced if you were there 10, 15, 20 years ago. We want to make sure that it's used as an engagement tool rather than a pure delivery tool. You know, that kind of helps us to blur that line where we say, am I here for the flashy or am I here for the storyline and the engagement?
We built an area of our park, Sesame Street at SeaWorld Orlando, that's built on a nostalgia brand. So part of that is balancing the nostalgia of what the Sesame Street that we grew up with, but also meeting the guest where they are. What are their expectations? They expect to be entertained. They expect to have things to do. And what can we do beyond a dry play area, a wet play area, culinary, retail? What else can we build in there? Because they expect that from us.
And I think that it's about story in the sense that the reason I think Sesame is so successful for us is because that story, the technology only fits into exactly what that story is. So if you're using it because it's the cool new thing, that you're not doing your guests any favor. But if they come back and you're just modernizing or telling a story in a different way, but still holding on to that heart of that story, I think you're good to go.
I myself am from the visual effects world, and the rule of thumb is if you're watching a movie and you can tell it's special effects, they didn't do a good job. It's supposed to be invisible. And the same concept we apply at these attractions is you're telling the story, and you don't want to get the technology in the way, you want it to be invisible. So.
And of course, this is AV, 5 people, 5 opinions. I agree with all of this, but also the thing I try to keep in mind is, I hate to say it, kids today, because it makes me sound old. My nephew has never had a rotary phone.
Yep.
His idea of nostalgia is completely different than mine. So you have to walk that fine line of, is it parent nostalgia or is it for the kid? Because I literally, my nephew has never even used a CD. So telling him about what vinyl is going to be lost. So there is, as everyone's alluded to, an important part of the storytelling of creating the new nostalgia and bringing those experiences to light for both the parents and the kids, and that's the truly creative part of the process.
I'm going to ask the question first and then qualify it because my questions can be a bit confusing. I want you to think about the museum of the future in 50 or 100 years. The Romans built the Colosseum 2,000 years ago. You can go and touch it and feel it and have an AR or a VR experience today that enhances it. I fear that we're living a bit in the dark ages with all of this media. We talked about Back to the Future ride, which was unique for IMAX. It was unique. Why wasn't it preserved as a museum ride so that people in 50 years can go, that's what they did? So if you understood the question, given that we couldn't reproduce the media on IMAX today unless it was reproduced for digital rather than film, where do you see the museum exhibits in 50 or 100 years to show what we're doing now?
So I can go with some of that. Back to the Future exists still. We have the media. Also, if we have the same building, all of that still exists. And if you look at things such as the Haunted Mansion, that's 45, 50 years old out in California, there is history. We still have at Universal E.T.'s Adventure, which is one of the first attractions we ever built, one of the first immersive ones. So we are aware of that. But there's also the other thing, like you said, museums. Museums are important. And one of the things I think is the balancing out. You know, you were talking about the Cooper Hewitt Museum, part of the Smithsonian. I've been involved with the Smithsonian before I took the job at Universal. And one of the things that's very interesting to me is they have every single artifact they have online, viewable on the internet. And still a few million people a year still go to their museums. So it's a fine walking act, and knowing that, yes, we still need to keep things, we still need to make them exciting, but we have to communicate with the visitors and the guests in the language they want, which sometimes is the digital pen. Sometimes it's the, I want to be able to take my picture in front of a fake moon landing and post it on Instagram. And it all has to evolve. But there is still the, you can go back to the Smithsonian Castle that started it all and still have your history. So it's a matter of taking incremental steps and deciding when something revolutionary is worth keeping.
And I think it's about listening to our guests, because when you said we all thought the home movie studio would be, or the home movie would take over film, and we wouldn't be going to movie theaters anymore. I sometimes think we don't think and listen to our guests enough. The reason It's a Small World is probably theirs. I think people would rebel if it actually got taken down. And I think Disney really actually does that really well. The idea that you brought your kids and it's the nostalgia kind of question. I think you have to talk to your guests. I think you need to understand who's coming and visiting you, because I think a lot of people would say, hey, I want to keep going on that ride. I go on Haunted Mansion every time I go to Disney, and I love it, and it's still great technology. And we just have to listen more and talk to each other and to who's actually paying to get into our institutions, I think.
So we want to thank every one of our incredible speakers and give them a round of applause. We want to thank Avixa and Blooloop for setting up this presentation. We want to thank all of you for coming today. We appreciate your participation and your being here, and look forward to your responses. Thank you so much. Have a great day.